Laura Harris-Smith, filling in for Sid Roth. Welcome to my world, where it's naturally supernatural. My guest, get this, spent 5 weeks in heaven. And when he came back, he brought heaven to earth with him. And where heaven is, there can be no pain or sickness. Are you guys ready to experience heaven?
Yeah.
Is there a supernatural dimension? A world beyond the one we know? Is there life after death? Do angels exist? Can our dreams contain messages from heaven? Can we tap into ancient secrets of the supernatural? Are healing miracles real? Sid Roth has spent over 35 years researching the strange world of the supernatural. Join Sid for this edition of It's Supernatural.
Hi, I'm here with my guest, Steve Musick. And Steve, I want to talk for just a moment about your upbringing. You grew up in a nice church-going family, but everything was not okay. Explain it to me.
I grew up in an Orthodox Episcopalian household.
Okay.
So it was very high church. It was very formal. Wow. But I also grew up in a really violent household. My brother was undiagnosed bipolar, and we were latchkey kids.
Okay.
And so that meant every afternoon was terror time for me. And for all the years that I can remember growing up, he just beat the daylights out of me every chance he got. And part of that also put me in a place where my antidote, my coping mechanism, was to be vacant. And so he got all the limelight, which bipolar wants, and I gave it to him. So I grew up, violence and vacancy was really part of my upbringing as a kid, all the way to adolescence.
So then you just tried to stay invisible,
yes.
Probably just hidden. But then you joined the Navy, and you were actually qualifying to be a Navy SEAL. So then what happened there?
Well, part of being in the Navy was it gave me a first opportunity to step outside of myself. And one of the things that they do in the Navy is they give you an opportunity to try out for SEALs. And there were 900 people in a chow hall where the SEALs said, hey, if you guys want to try out for SEALs, come to the Aqua Center at 6 o'clock tonight. And there were 30 of us who showed up. 3 of us qualified for SEALs. And it was the first time that I felt like I could actually be somebody. And it mattered. The following week, I also found out that I qualified for Annapolis through the studies, and they do academic testing for recruits. So within 2 weeks, I'm qualified to go to SEALs, and I'm qualified to go to Annapolis. And the Father had a totally different plan for my life. The next week, they lined us all up in a big hangar, and they gave us the swine flu vaccine. They tested the swine flu vaccine on military personnel in North Chicago, all of the soldiers at Fort Sheridan, all the Navy people at Great Lakes. And I had an allergic reaction to the swine flu vaccine.
Okay, so then you went to the emergency room.
Yeah.
And then something even worse happened. You got sicker and sicker, and what happened?
Well, they started an IV, and they realized that I was in severe trouble. And about 20 minutes later, a nurse came in with a big syringe, and she said, I should have known something was about to come undone, because the song playing on the radio in the emergency department was a group called ELO, Electric Light Orchestra, yes. And they were singing Evil Woman.
Oh boy.
I should have known. She inserted the syringe into my IV tube and pushed the plunger. Well, I was allergic to the antidote.
Oh, boy.
And that's tantamount to a lethal injection. I don't remember what happened after that. My arm got really hot all the way to the armpit, and I went out. I woke up 5 weeks later with a Navy nurse sitting at the foot of my bed.
So you've got to back up for just a minute, because I know that everyone else is thinking what I'm thinking, which is take me from the I passed out to what did you see, where did you go, who did you meet? Take me down that journey first.
Everybody wants to know, what is heaven like? I could tell you what heaven was like for me.
Okay.
Very common experience. You're weightless. You go through a tunnel of light.
Okay.
You definitely feel like you're transported. You know, Hollywood does a really good job, you know, Trans-Warp Drive, if you're a Star Trek
Okay,
fan,
yeah.
it's like that.
Okay.
And then you get pushed out on the other side of the tunnel into a place that is a real place. It has gravity. You have a body. You have a soul. You're there. The magnificence of the place is contrast, which means we live right now in the land of bland. Mm-hmm. We live in 1950s television where it's black and white and grainy, whereas heaven is HD on steroids, vibrant.
What about Jesus? Tell me about Jesus.
Jesus is a young man, hazel eyes, long hair. You would think that he was a bodybuilder, a logger. He's massively built, strong, powerful. And yet, Jesus is a paradox as well, because he's tender to the touch. He's soothing in his voice and the way that he relates so deeply to me. And what he did eliminated all of the carnage of my lifetime. You know, the violence in my household, the vacancy in the way I was raised. He settled all of that. Wow. And he walked me through basically all of my history, and he said, it was okay. He was there the whole time. I just never knew it. And so being in heaven is you have to be fully there, because heaven comes after you emotionally. It's like being inside pure joy. You know, we live in happiness and depression. Mm-hmm. And there's a tidal flow to what happens to us here. In heaven, there's no flow. It is pure joy, 100%, all the time comes after you.
That is so fascinating, just amazing. All right, well, Jesus spoke the worst words you could ever hear. We're going to talk more about those when we come back with Steve and Musick.
I am in Galilee. It is so amazing what just happened. 1,000 Jewish Israelis that had never heard the gospel came to this meeting. The angels are celebrating because almost all of the 1,000 people that came stood up and made professions of faith. So many people were physically healed. It's a new day. It's a new season. It's a new year. Happy New Year.
So, Stephen, I'm eager to know what these words are. Tell us what the worst words are that you've ever heard. You're in heaven with Jesus, and he says something to you, and it's the worst thing that you had ever heard. What?
When I was in heaven, I thought I was staying. I thought I was there forever, and I'm liking it. And the worst words I've ever heard from that day to this were the words of Jesus with his arm over my shoulder. And he said, you can't stay. And when he said that, I woke up in intensive care isolation with a Navy nurse at the foot of my bed, charting, taking notes.
So you went from the top of your game to being permanently disabled. And so you woke up in this shell, an incarcerated body, as you said. Explain that to us.
I had 60% lung damage in both lungs. So when they discharged me, I sounded like Darth Vader. I had a really hard time breathing. Today they would call that COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. I just had a really hard time getting enough air in, and my exchange wasn't really good. And they thought I would gradually get better and that I would get to the place where I was an okay person, but I never did.
But then heaven broke in.
Yeah.
And this is what you refer to as the bubble. Please explain that to us. What happened next?
I was in a pancake restaurant in a meeting with a client, and a big lumberjack kind of a guy comes in with his little boy. And they take a seat real close to the front of the restaurant.
Boy, I've had enough of you today.
And about halfway through the meal, the big lumberjack of a guy reaches across the table and he slapped his son so hard that it knocked his son out of the booth. And the restaurant, of course, froze. And I couldn't stop myself. I turned to my client and I said, "Excuse me," and I went over to pick the little boy up. I firmly thought that the little boy would have blood running out of his left ear. I was glad he didn't. I loaded the little boy into the booth and I slid in next to him and I leaned forward and looked at the big lumberjack and I said, "I need you to ask your son to forgive you for what you just did." And he's looking at me incredulous. He says, "I'm not doing any of that." And he said, "What gives you the right to talk to me that way?" And I said, "What gives you the right to smack your son around? I know this wasn't the first time." And he said, "Well, it's the way my dad raised me."
What's the way my dad raised me?
And when he said that, I asked, a light went off in my brain, and I said, "So what did it feel like when you were his age to get smacked around like that?" And he says, "Well, what are you going to do?" And I turned to the cash register lady and I said, "Call 911. We need the ambulance. We need a police, and we need somebody from social services for the boy." And I turned back to the guy and I said, "Ask your son to forgive you for what you just did because of how it felt for you when you got beat up at his age." And he started tears. He got misty. Big burly guy got misty. And the bubble of a kingdom of heaven erupted around our table it reached all the way to the cash register lady who started crying. And the only thing you heard in the restaurant was the 911 lady who said, "911, what's the nature of your emergency?" And I turned to her and I said, "Tell her that it was a mistake. Everything's going to be okay." And I turned to the guy and I said, ask your son to forgive you for what you just did. Break the cycle of violence in your household that's been there for years. And he did.
I'm real sorry, son.
Now, here's a guy who's disabled, scrawny, in a suit, talking to a lumberjack who's been abusing his little boy. And it broke the power of that spirit from generation to generation. And that little boy didn't have to be raised like I was.
Right. So then that was the fruit of it, of what happened in the middle of that bubble. But what did it feel like? Tell us what it felt like for you. And were they aware of it, that they were inside of this experience?
One of the things about the bubbles of heaven is they're for everybody, because everybody experiences it. And it's the thing that turned his heart. It's the thing that made a guy who's been aggressive and an abuser weep. That's powerful. That's the kingdom. It feels like heaven, but not the heaven to the full. It's an echo of the previous place. And when I felt that, there was something that went off in me that said, "Ooh, pay attention. This is really big." And so for now 41 years, that happens over and over and over and over, not just to me, but for people that I've trained to do this. And part of what I'm doing here, part of what I'm doing now, is I want to train lots and lots of people to experience the kingdom of heaven in the here and now, because we should and we can.
And you know, we talk all the time about being in a bubble of protection. It's a concept that we grasp. But to say that we are in a bubble from heaven, that's a phenomenal thing, and it's accessible by all of us. When we come back, we're going to talk more with Stephen about this, and we're going to talk about how you can experience a bubble of heaven.
Did you know that the kingdom of heaven is closer than you think? It is not limited to a building where we assemble to worship God. God's kingdom is right in front of you. You just need to understand how to see what's there. Open the door and walk right in. Call now and get Stephen Musick's powerful new book, Life After Heaven, Walking in the Bubble of God's Kingdom, and his anointed 3-part audio CD teaching, Experiencing the Kingdom of Heaven on Earth, exclusive for our supernatural audience. Yours for a donation of $35. Shipping and handling is included. Ask for offer number 9512. Through Steve Musick's new book, you will read about his out-of-body experience, visiting heaven, and his encounter with Jesus. Receive new eyes to begin to see the kingdom of heaven in this life. Understand the secret of bringing heaven to earth every moment of your day. Learn how to nurture a relationship with God, so real and intimate you'll feel his nearness as strongly as Steve Musick does. You will also receive Steve Musick's 3-part audio CD teaching series, which contains 3 hours of life-changing teaching. Steve will share the revelation of how to usher God's love and presence into the world around you. He wants to empower you to bring the kingdom of heaven to people in your life. Through this teaching, you will learn how to recognize the kingdom of heaven like bubbles that are trying to break into your life. Understand how to receive divine provision from God. Find out how to connect your passions and talents with your job and your divine calling. Learn how to obtain godly wisdom, drowning out the voices of distraction. Get in sync with God's kingdom and obtain the key to obtain emotional and physical healing. Begin to experience bubbles of God's kingdom here on earth, where nothing is impossible.
It will change the way you see the world in the here and now.
Don't miss out on getting Stephen Musick's powerful new book, Life After Heaven, Walking in the Bubble of God's Kingdom, and his anointed 3-part audio CD teaching, Experiencing the Kingdom of Heaven on Earth, exclusive for our supernatural audience. Yours for a donation of $35. Shipping and handling is included. Ask for offer number 9512. Call or you can send your check to Sid Roth. It's Supernatural. P.O. Box 39222, Charlotte, North Carolina 28278. Please specify offer number 9512 or log on to sidroth.org. Call or write today.
We now return to It's Supernatural.
Okay, Stephen, so I'm really curious. This is the part where it gets interesting, because God wasn't finished surprising you yet. So you were still at 40% lung capacity. You were not healed. You were still infirmed. And then you felt led to go to a prayer meeting. What happened?
On a Thursday night, we were part of a Vineyard Christian Fellowship, and I was in the midst of getting sick again, and I decided I'd go to the prayer meeting. My wife interjected, "You ought to be going to the hospital, not the prayer meeting." Went there, and the pastor, word of knowledge, very specific, called me out of the crowd. I was on my feet. I didn't get about halfway to the front of the church. They laid hands on me. Randy Phillips laid hands on me, and it was like electricity went through my body. And I went back to heaven for 20 minutes. Had another conversation with the risen Christ. I went back to the exact same spot I was 10 years earlier. The words this time were, "Things will be different from now on." And I woke up breathing deeply on the floor of the Vineyard Church. And I've been healthy ever since.
So you were fully healed. That's amazing. Okay, so then everything accelerated at that point, because you began having really like an increase in these experiences where you would have these bubbles of heaven that would show up around you. And so tell us a little bit about that.
I got to the place where I could recognize when heaven was going to show up. I began to be in a place where I would anticipate. It's kind of like being a volunteer. I'm available as an ambassador of the kingdom of heaven. Lord, use me however you would want. And so the occasions increased. There was one lady in particular that we did a healing service, and she walked up to Elaine and I, and she was bent over from scoliosis, had been in really horrible pain for 20 years. And when we started praying for her, I was looking down. And we laid hands on her, and my wife's a physical therapist. And that woman literally snapped and crackled and popped for 2 minutes. And when we were done praying, she was pain-free for the first time in 20 years. And I was looking at this beautiful, radiant, auburn hair, green-eyed woman right in the eye. And the bubble of heaven was there. Because inside the bubble of heaven, miracles happen. It's the way it's designed. And we should experience more of the kingdom of heaven, bubble to bubble to bubble, than we do. We've just forgotten over 2,000 years.
Well, what's amazing to me, though, is that because of your past and because of you being a person who preferred being invisible, you didn't tell a lot of people about this. Then you have this encounter where you get healed, you go back to heaven momentarily, and Jesus tells you, everything's different now. I have a mission for you. And then you started telling people, what is your mission? What is your mandate?
My mandate happened in a very powerful encounter that the Father specifically told me, I want you to get serious about telling your story. And so that's kind of why I wrote the book, Life After Heaven. It's why I do teaching and training. My mission in life is to help people experience the kingdom of heaven in the here and now, because we can and we should.
Well, how do we bring heaven to earth like that? How do we do that?
You know, it's a lot about being available. It's a lot about volunteering for us. And it's a lot about understanding the methods and the way and the heart of the Father. And so part of my work and part of what was part of the book is teaching people about being available, teaching people what the look-fors are, because there are certain telltale signs that you'll know right away that, oh, this is a bubble of heaven about to occur. Lots of people who have read the book have sent me messages that said, you know, that's occurred to me before, but I didn't know what it was.
I was just about to say that. I was just about to ask you that.
Yep.
This is fascinating. There's got to be more people than me who are, so many thoughts racing through my head. They're watching right now. Can you pray for them? Can you just maybe speak directly to them?
Jesus came because he wanted us to have abundance in the way we relate to one another and the way we relate to him. And there's no better opportunity than to have a bubble of the kingdom of heaven expand and ignite around you in order to receive that for you, and then for you to be able to be an ambassador of the kingdom of heaven for our world and the people around you.
Amen. Amen. God wants you to experience a bubble of heaven in your life.
Did you know that the kingdom of heaven is closer than you think? It is not limited to a building where we assemble to worship God. God's kingdom is right in front of you. You just need to understand how to see what's there, open the door, and walk right in. Steve Musick's heart stopped beating, and he lay in a coma for 5 weeks. During that time, he visited heaven, and what he learned can help you access miracles, healing, supernatural provision, and the powerful gifts of the Holy Spirit in a way that makes the supernatural a normal part of your life. Call now and get Stephen Musick's powerful new book, Life After Heaven, Walking in the Bubble of God's Kingdom, and his anointed 3-part audio CD teaching, Experiencing the Kingdom of Heaven on Earth, exclusive for our supernatural audience. Yours for a donation of $35. Shipping and handling is included. Ask for offer number 9512.
I wrote the book in direct response to an event. It was a call from the Father that said, I want you to get serious about telling your story. It will change the way you see the world in the here and now.
Through Steve Musick's new book, you will read about his out-of-body experience, visiting heaven, and his encounter with Jesus. Receive new eyes to begin to see the kingdom of heaven in this life. Understand the secret of bringing heaven to earth every moment of your day. Learn how to nurture a relationship with God, so real and intimate you'll feel his nearness as strongly as Steve Musick does.
I continue to experience echoes of heaven in the here and now. The kingdom of heaven is closer than we think, and everyone can access it and should regularly.
You will also receive Steve Musick's 3-part audio CD teaching series, which contains 3 hours of life-changing teaching. Steve will share the revelation of how to usher God's love and presence into the world around you. He wants to empower you to bring the kingdom of heaven to people in your life.
In my experience, heaven can be encountered in bubbles. Those are events where the kingdom of heaven reigns supreme.
Through this teaching, you will learn how to recognize the kingdom of heaven, like bubbles that are trying to break into your life. Understand how to receive divine provision from God. Find out how to connect your passions and talents with your job and your divine calling. Learn how to obtain godly wisdom, drowning out the voices of distraction. Get in sync with God's kingdom and obtain the key to obtain emotional and physical healing. Begin to experience bubbles of God's kingdom here on earth, where nothing is impossible.
We can learn how to experience bubbles of heaven in the here and now over and over again.
Don't miss out on getting Stephen Musick's powerful new book, Life After Heaven, Walking in the Bubble of God's Kingdom, and his anointed 3-part audio CD teaching, Experiencing the Kingdom of Heaven on Earth, exclusive for our supernatural audience. Yours for a donation of $35. Shipping and handling is included. Ask for offer number 9512. Call or you can send your check to Sid Roth. It's Supernatural, P.O. Box 39222, Charlotte, North Carolina 28278. Please specify offer number 9512 or log on to sidroth.org. Call or write today.
Next week on It's Supernatural.
All the prophets agree this is the year of breakthrough. Maybe you're saying, I believe that, but how do I get there? Join us, Hakeem and Naeem Collins, on It's Supernatural with Sid Roth, and we will show you how.